Hello, my name is Denisa Guzman, and I'll be presenting on the one-drop rule. The one-drop rule was initially introduced in 1924 as a marker or identifier of those with mixed ancestry, or at the time they were referred to as mulattoes. It was also referred to as the one ancestor rule, traceable amount rule, and to anthropologists, it was referred to as the hypo-descent rule. The term was initially coined in the American South, and the policy was initially introduced as a way to not only promote superior races, but also as a way to control mixed individuals within the political sphere in regards to voting and ownership, but social as well, so that they know that they are in fact inferior beings. Common ideologies at the time included naturalists and eugenics. I'll discuss eugenics in a moment. Interracial relations at this time was a complicated and messy ordeal. Though today is seen as normal, back during the 1920s, it was heavily scrutinized. The 1920s were a time of the Roaring Twenties. The president was Calvin Coolidge, and Wrigley Field had just been finished. However, there was a heavy debate that involved nature versus nurture, which implied how an individual was raised and brought up in their relationships. For instance, nature argued that an individual was a product of their own surroundings, such as rural or urban areas. On the other hand, nurture insinuated that how an individual was cared for shaped how they grew up. On the right, you'll see the eugenics seal of thought seal. Eugenics was initially introduced by Francis Galton as a belief that how individuals bred either hurt or helped the future in their offspring. For instance, mixing races, such as a black woman and a white man, led to the diluting of the next generation and hurt society's chances. But if a family did not mix, for instance, a white man and a white woman, they were staying within their bounds and their master race was protected. Moving forward to the modern time, we can see that if racism is supported by science, it can in fact be immediately backlashed by a scientific community. But it gave certain sciences an ambiguous legacy. Theodosius Dobzhansky and Ashley Montagu were two individuals that had heavy debate on what race was. Dobzhansky argued that race exists inherently in nature, and that it's inevitable that different races will mix. On the other hand, Montagu argued that it's merely a social construct created by society to control different races and control an inferior-superior belief and thought system. However, from the argument of race, many things have arisen, such as sterilization, which I'll discuss later. Moving from just race, we'll shift back to interracial relations. In the case of Loving and Virginia, a couple was persecuted for their relationship. The two individuals included Mildred Jeter, a black woman, and Richard Loving, a white man. The two married legally within the confines of Washington, D.C., and following their marriage, returned home to their state of Virginia. Upon their arrival, they were arrested and jailed for cohabitation, which within the state of Virginia is illegal. Following their arrest, the two found representation from the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. In 1967, the Lovings won the Supreme Court case, and decades later, we can still feel the effects. For instance, in the case of Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015, the Loving versus Virginia case was cited to later legalize gay marriage within the United States. Though some see a difference in mixed relations, many do not. Yes, there were obligatory laws that promoted blatant racism, such as miscegenation and cohabitation, but it's still evident. For instance, in 1985, the 20th century, South Africa broke their anti-miscegenation laws. Furthermore, even though we have had a black president, President Barack Obama, we then moved forward to a white president, President Donald Trump, who occasionally offends minority groups such as African Americans and those of Hispanic descent. Not only do rules seem to be shifting, but in the 20th century, control of ideologies was common. For instance, political control was obvious with mass sterilization occurring within Puerto Rico and California, where hundreds of thousands of women were illegally sterilized so as to prevent their future offspring from diminishing the world population. Not only in regards to health, but voting as well, due to the fact that African Americans couldn't vote until 1965, and in our own state, Oregon, they couldn't own property until the 1950s. On the right, you'll see a picture of a placard of the 1907 Indiana eugenics law. The plaque is as follows. By late 1800s, Indiana authorities believed criminality, mental problems, and pauperism were hereditary. Various laws were enacted based on this belief. In 1907, Governor J. Frank Hanley approved first state eugenics law, making sterilization mandatory for certain individuals in state custody. Sterilizations halted in 1909 by Governor Thomas R. Marshall. So not only are these sterilizations happening within California and Puerto Rico, but Indiana as well. Moving past political control, it has also become social. In regards to Get Out, a film that is a social commentary, was categorized as a comedy at the 2017 Golden Globes. Even more so, Stacey Dash, a congressional candidate, commented that in regards to an alt-right rally that resulted in the death of a counter-protester, there was blame on both sides, and the president degraded other countries moving forward, calling certain countries shitholes. Societal views are inevitable, and they'll never fade away. Even though America proclaims it's done with its racist past, continues forward with instances such as the dreadlock ban, which allows those that are going through the hiring process to be persecuted by their hairstyle. While there is nothing truly wrong with the dreadlocks, it's seen as a material thing that if wanting a job badly enough, an individual can simply change it as it is not a necessary accessory. How does this connect to scientific racism, the idea of the one-drop rule? Well, simply put, there are terms and ideas such as phrenology, which is the study of size and shape of the skull in order to find out about a person's character or abilities, which when applied can hurt individuals. In this case, phrenology is the same as the one-drop rule, due to the fact that an individual has no control or say in what they are given when they are brought into the world. For instance, with phrenology in the past, many used numbers not to generate new theories, but to illustrate a priori of conclusions. In short, it basically says that individuals came in with a prior belief or ideology, such as racism, and used numbers to not only justify their beliefs, but to justify them to the entirety of the world. However, broken phrenology never stuck. Samuel George Morton's study on cranial capacity in regards to intelligence never stuck. And I'm to assume that they didn't understand that at this time, racism, though it was popular and obvious, it wasn't right. Though back then it was understood as a social okay. Basically, anyone could say anyone about anything. But moving forward, it's not. An individual that is black is no better than an individual that is white. An individual that is brown is no better than an individual that is black. And unconscious bias is obvious. It was a different time, different beliefs, different systems that brought on these things. And in short, racism in America has never been pretty. It never will be, truly. History never has been pretty. Whether it be Hitler's concentration camps or America's own concentration camps. It's never going to be pretty unless we face the facts. It'll most likely never diminish from history. Racism is racism. It'll be here when we go, and it'll be here when the next generation comes in. But at least to acknowledge that it exists is enough for me. because at the end of the day, when minorities struggle to reach the finish line, it's simply going to be moved because that is simply the way of the world.